Welcome back to another episode of With Sonar. It's a great week. This is our first show here in April. We were off last week, but very excited to be back. And did you guys file your taxes, by the way? Tax day's coming up.
Yep, I did it end of February, I guess. So.
Okay.
Locked in.
Way ahead of the game. So make sure you get your taxes. This is the last week to get your taxes done. I think you've got about 6 days left. Also, coming up here next week, so a week from tomorrow, we've got our State of the Freight webinar. That will be hosted by our CEO, Craig Fuller, and Head of Market Intelligence, Zach Strickland. Be sure to tune in for that. Those are very popular, by the way. Yeah. Very popular. A lot of folks get involved. That's community. Like you can talk to them.
Yeah, if you haven't watched one, they're incredible because you're getting knowledge from two leaders that understand the data and what it means arguably better than anyone else. And then obviously there's a Q&A section so you can get involved and ask them questions directly. So definitely check it out. If you haven't seen one before, highly recommend.
Tune in.
Tanner, do a lot of our customers go to the webinars?
Yes, a lot of our active sonar customers love the webinars, especially this one. It's usually a highlight of the quarter.
Very good. Well, be sure to tune in for that. It's coming up. And then on a side note, we are, while not a FreightWaves event per se, we're going to the Gartner Supply Chain Summit. FreightWaves has a very big presence. We're a sponsor of the Gartner Supply Chain Summit in May next month. The reason I bring that up is Craig and Zach again are speaking at the Gartner Supply Chain Summit and alongside one of our customers, Unilever. So you're going to be able to hear both from Craig and Zach again at Gartner and be able to interact with Unilever, one of our customers there, and they're going to be able to talk through things. So if you're going to the Gartner Supply Chain Summit, be sure to stop by the roundtable as well as the speaking engagement that they're hosting. All right, enough of that. We've got one more announcement, but we'll save it for the very end of the show. In the meantime, today, not a ton happened in the freight world over the last week. It was a fairly straight week, although we did see one more leg down in rates, but outside of that, market was pretty stable, right? What were the highlights over the last week?
I mean, really, you kind of look at it, volumes to start the month, kind of started to take a little bit of a dive, right? I mean, it's not massive. I mean, still holding above that 10,000 level, but you're starting to see those come down. Rejections are broke below 3%, which is kind of a matter of when, not if. And
that's really like a psychological barrier. I feel like that was.
Yeah, because it was kind of thought of. I mean, you look back, like the only time they were ever this low was when the economy was shut down. You break through that. Rejections have a natural floor, right? They'll never be 0% because capacity is imbalanced and things like that. So to see them break below that 3% mark wasn't telling or important, but it's still the same trend. Right. It doesn't 2% or 2.8% or 3.1%. Overall, the market's still pretty similar. Ultimately, very soft.
Yeah, I'd say it's just new lower lows, I think is what we've seen. Everybody's expecting it. We're still in the same trend. But as far as the trend, like you said, it's been kind of boring. It's the exact same. Nothing super important has changed or flipped yet. Yeah. I would say the one thing we continue to see, which we talk about it this whole week, is more closures. More and more carriers closing. We had a story on FreightWaves earlier today about a team driver, father and son in Illinois that just got left. Because company shut down, went bankrupt. So unfortunately, I think we're going to see more of that.
That's a tough situation to be in. But on a positive note, though, the CPI report came in, and I think for the most part, that was a positive reading, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
How would you guys read that?
The way I see it is it's not, prices are staying high, right? You have to remember, prices haven't come down.
Correct.
I think the rate of increases has come down, but it's not that prices have come down. Your eggs have come down. Those prices have come down. What was it, a 10.9% drop month over month?
Which the Falasca household appreciates greatly. We are now buying eggs again.
But they're still 36% higher than they were this time last year.
Damn.
Just mind that.
Are they, though? I don't know if that's true in my grocery store.
We're still in this weird environment where, like, bad news is good news and good news is bad news. It's really weird. Like, yes, technically inflation is up 0.1% month over month, and year over year we're 5%, but it's still inflation. Like 2% is the target, and the fact that we're still at 5% year over year, like that's a bad thing. Like
5% on a big number.
On a big number, yeah. But all of a sudden, like this morning, the stock market acts like it's great news and that we're heading in the right direction, which we are heading in the right direction, but we're still in this weird environment where bad news is good news.
Yeah, no, very true, very true. There's, let's go ahead and just bring up, I guess, go ahead and bring up tender rejections. I think this is important. This is what you were talking about earlier. And this is something that we've been posting about on Twitter, kind of watching it unfold a little bit. So the trend is mostly the same. I think the biggest thing to take away from this chart is, I mean, you are essentially at the lowest of the low that this has really ever been at. And you're getting awfully close to that COVID dip there back in April of 2020.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, can you go lower than that? Because it was like 2.57%, I think, in the last week of April of 2020. Can we go lower than that, I think, is the question now. I think that's because it doesn't seem like there's anything to move this higher, right? We're seeing exits in the market or bankruptcies and the like, but it's not enough to impact anything yet. And I think that's the key, is there's nothing to suggest this number is going to surge back higher right from here.
Yeah, and the scary thing about it is that, yes, we're technically similar to the bottom of COVID, but the markets are very different. The reason we were at 2.5, 2.6% something is because the entire economy was shut down and nobody was buying anything. Like now COVID's pretty much behind us for the majority, and now we're in a somewhat normal market where people are out and people are spending money, but now we're at the same rejection level. So yes, technically, even though the actual number is the same or close to it, I think we're in very different environments.
Yeah, totally agree. And it'll be interesting to see how this impacts. And what's remarkable about this is while the market is so unbelievably soft, and I think a lot of folks were begging the question of rates are not going to go back to pre-pandemic levels. That does not appear to be true anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's kind of this mean reversion, right? You think about it, rates were so high that they had to come down they had to make a meaningful decline, right?
Yeah.
What that was, like obviously pre-pandemic, we were in this healthy, I don't want to say healthy range because we saw a record number of bankruptcies in 2019, but like it was pretty stable, I guess is the way to say it. What we haven't seen is stable rate environment at all at any point during the last 2.5 years. And I think that's the key, is like we need some stabilizing on the rate side of the market before we really see anything. And that's the real kicker, I think.
Yeah, the only way that happens is capacity leaving the market.
Yep.
And I know we're seeing shutdowns. You just said it a few minutes ago. Is yes, you're seeing these 20 truck companies file bankruptcy, 50 truck, 100 truck, but we're going to need some Goliaths to fall. Not necessarily, somebody like the Knight-Swift merger, but I'm talking about in that like 500 to 1,500 truck range. Like some of those guys are gonna have to fail.
You're gonna need a few of those
in order to take big chunks out of what's going on.
Yeah,
or demand has to come back, and right now we don't see any signals for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part we were really looking for, right, was the demand side. Because, yes, you need capacity to leave the market, but it is a slow drip. Because, I mean, honestly, I think having rates as high as they were almost hampers it, like the cycle on the downside too, right? If a carrier was built up their war chest, right? They had this cash flow. They were able to set aside cash for a rainy day. Now you're starting to bleed that cash off because the odds of running profitably at $2.20 a mile is a lot lower than running at $3 a mile, right? So you're starting to bleed that off, and it just extends this runway that carriers had or could have had if they held on to this cash. And I think that ultimately hurts it. So you need a demand to help use up this capacity, and that's just not there.
100%. Let's go ahead and pull up the NTI here, our National Truckload Index, just to see how the impact has been to rates. I mean, and you can see it right there, down about 224 per mile right now. This is all in on the spot market for dry van. And we are we have dipped below the high of 2019 there, where you can kind of see it ramped up around Christmas time. So we're below pre-pandemic highs.
Yeah.
Is a good way to say it. And that's all in. Now, we obviously all know, not a great place to be. Fuel is 38% higher than it was pre-pandemic. Equipment costs about 25% higher than it was around pre-pandemic, and that's after it already coming down off of its peak, right? Volumes are less, insurance premiums are quite a bit more, operating ratios are being compressed in every possible direction. So again, the mean reversion, it's happening. I almost wonder if we've overcorrected to the downside. I don't think we found the bottom on rates to the downside, but it does feel like, at least with the spot market, we've overcorrected to the downside. Before, we're probably going to come up a little bit and hang out there for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, but like, what's that cause from? Is that a little bit of produce season? Is it a little bit of flattening from the bottom? Like, there's nothing that signifies that might hold or why that's there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like stocks, right? You know, when 2008 happened, right, and the market sold off approximately, and it hit a bottom of nearly 50% down, the S&P, it's like, is there a cause for a 50% decline? Maybe the right decline was 37%. Maybe the right decline was 42%, right? So we overreact, right? You get a little over leveraged to the top side and things grow too much, right? And then everybody wants to get out because they realize the rug's being pulled, and then you get a little too much selling pressure and you go down too far, and then you come up a little bit before you finally start to climb out. So we oversold. 2009, the stock market did very well, up like 20%, but it was because we oversold. But it still took us 3 more years to reach back to the pre-financial crisis highs of the stock market. So I think we might see something like that in the logistics market. I think we go a little bit lower, and then we come up just enough to kind of settle in, and companies can run at a profit. And then eventually, over most likely many years or some crazy event where demand comes back or a lot more equity leaves the market, we inch back up.
Yeah, I think the concern with that one, right, is when you look at rates, you really have I don't want to say one person setting the market, but it's almost like a race to the bottom, right?
Right, it feels like that, yeah.
It's like if there's one carrier out there willing to take this, well, that's going to be what the rate is. Where on the stock market, this is where they're similar but different, right? Because you can put in, hey, this is the limit that we're willing to pay and things like that, and it either gets filled or it doesn't. Well, somebody can swoop in there and take a load out from under you at, if say you're charging $1.70, they come in at $1.65, bam, there you go. Well, now you've lost the freight, and it's moved the rate lower, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's where it kind of differs. Like we talk about it because it's so fragmented and there's a lot of buyers and a lot of sellers. It's set to market, but in this instance, that all it takes is somebody willing to take a cheaper rate to drive that rate further down. So if there's still somebody out there, it's going to push it down. It's going to take a lot of people be willing, saying, hey, we can't operate anymore, to push that rate back up, even if you think it's overdone.
I also think it's just so many people are just taking the lanes for what it is, right? Driver will call a broker, will say, hey, this is what we're offering. You either got to take it or leave it. A lot of them they're just taking out without doing their research. And Luke, Tony and I, we've done lanes of the day all 3 days this week, and we have found 6 lanes that are well above, round trip, well above the national average. So there are still lanes that are out there that are available, that are decent paying lanes. You've got to put in the time and the research to be able to find them.
I think that's the key.
And some lanes are tighter capacity than others. I was looking at Green Bay, Wisconsin right now for outbound refrigerated tender rejections. Rates are down.
Yeah.
Rates are down. Tender rejections are up 50% year to date.
Yeah, exactly.
But
there's a chance to push rates up.
It should push rates up. Just everybody's in this mindset of down, down, down. But the reality is they have a little bit more. Tender rejections are at 13%. The overall reefer market's at 3%. Tender rejections nationally. They're at 13%. Rates haven't budged.
This is where, and that's why it's so important on the carrier front to understand what's going on in these markets, because you need to be able to take, especially in a down market or a softening freight market, you have to be able to take advantages where you have them, right? Even if it's hey, do you see that reefer rejections in Green Bay are on the rise, right? Hey, this is a chance. I have a little pricing power right now. Maybe it's not a lot. Maybe I can squeeze an extra couple cents, but that couple cents like we've talked about, over a very long mileage band adds up, and especially if you can do it every
do it
day,
again and again.
right? Yep. So it's those pennies make dollars very quickly, especially when you're talking lengths of haul. I mean, so, or longer lengths of haul. If you can, this is where you've got to be able to take advantage, where you go into a market like Atlanta, where rejections are what, 2%, 3%?
Yeah. Less than that,
There's
1%.
There's the pricing power in that market for a carrier is just basically non-existent. Everybody's taking any contracted freight they can. Anything that's left to the spot market is just getting sucked up at any rate. It's
100%.
just getting taken. And I think
100%.
that's a trend you'll see, at least for a little bit, unless we see produce season really kind of intensify, and that's the elephant in the room. Like, is produce season strong, or is it come in soft like everything else has kind of been soft so far this year?
Yeah. Now I want to switch gears a little bit. We introduced this, I think, for the first time last week. We were talking about wait times, and this is an interesting period because the market is so soft. A lot of shippers have the ability to, I think, make improvements to their warehouse because eventually, when the market does flip, in whatever capacity and whatever timeline that happens, right? Some of these facilities are going to be in a much better position than others. So I'm gonna come over here to the main screen, but let's go ahead and throw this up for folks to be able to see. So this is a tree map of a lot of the different industries that we have. And I think this is a really good picture of what's happening. So the industries with the biggest wait times are in the top left, and the industries with the lowest wait times are in the bottom right. So you've got distributors in the top right, you've got air freight, that's gonna be your airlines. You've got industrial machinery, right? Things like Caterpillar and Komatsu and so on, right? You've got food distributors down there, 134 minutes at some of these places. So basically, the left side of this is all over that 2-hour mark. And then a lot of folks below the 2-hour mark here, with some of the best performers down here. You look, home improvement retails down 17% week over week, 76 minutes. That's not a bad wait time. Not a bad wait time, right? Versus, look at industrial machinery, up 40% week over week. These are week over week numbers. To 136 minutes, you're having to wait there.
Yeah, I look at it, and I look at that home improvement one, and I've got Bank of America's credit card spending report. I mean, that's an area right now that is seeing slower spending, which to me, if you're not having to move things throughout or as fast, right, you can improve those efficiencies at these warehouses. You look at, and it's a trend on all of those, right? Home improvement, department stores, that general merchandise, things like that. Those are all areas that spending has slowed significantly. You can improve your efficiency at your warehouse because you're not having to move things through at such a breakneck speed like you were. And ultimately, it's leading to improvement. And then you look at the industrial side, which that side of the economy is still, it hasn't suffered maybe the same fate as the consumer. We'll put it that way. It's been more flat and relatively strong, and you're seeing it's still dealing with challenges.
Yeah, and one thing that's actually interesting on this chart, Luke, is soft drinks are down about 13%, right? The weather has started to kind of heat up. All these, water bottle, because I'm guessing soft drinks, like you've probably got some water in there, some energy drinks, also, Cokes and Sprites and stuff like that. But as it heats up, you would think that more soft drink freight would be going out, so therefore it would take longer to load because those facilities are much busier. So I'm interesting to see this 13% decrease.
Yeah, it is unique, and it could be. And now, keep in mind, it is a 13% decrease week over week, which is a really good direction to head in. It's headed in the right direction, but it's still at 125 minutes over that 2-hour threshold. So I think what the challenge here is, even though it's headed in the right direction, and I agree, Tony, demand definitely plays a part. A lot of these companies are trying to find ways to cut costs, and maybe that's to, hone down a little bit on the warehouse folks. But you have to be efficient, getting these trucks in and out. And I think it's a danger for the companies that have much higher wait times. To take a look here on that industrial retail center, look at this. This is over the last year. Look at that. Look at this spike that we've had. Excuse me.
Yeah,
that's massive.
Yeah, outside of the holidays, it's the highest it's been ever.
Yeah.
Any time in the past year, right? it's
You're at
definitely
Christmas,
concerning.
New Year's levels.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's concerning because at this point you're typically you think of that 2-hour mark is baked into the rate to be loaded and unloaded, right? And now you're wasting 16 minutes of that driver's time. Well, that 16 minutes can add up when you think about it going, 60 miles an hour down the road.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're talking, what is that, 16 miles shorter just by wasting that at 60 miles an hour. So that adds up. I mean, you come up 16 miles short and have to wait a day and you miss a delivery window. Well, and this is on average, right? So that means there are some industrial machinery companies that have extremely long wait times and some are closer to that 2 hours. So it's, it is concerning when you see that spike, especially because it's the biggest spike that we've seen. But overall, it's the highest level it's been too, right? It's the double whammy.
Yeah, and 120 minutes, like that's a long time. 2 hours, right? Like you think about it, even looking November, you're kind of in that 100-minute range. Like, okay, an hour and a half, like that's understandable, right? But over 2 hours, you add that up. Drivers doing what on average 4 to 5 loads per week. Let's say it takes 2 hours. That's almost a full nother load that they could complete if every single shipper and receiver is over 2 hours.
I feel like when I was working in logistics, I had a lot of extremes. I had a customer that very consistently loaded between 3 and 4 hours. That's how my trucks were gonna be there. I knew I had to pay detention every single time, and I just charged them for it. Mm-hmm. So I never charged my customer detention because they wouldn't pay it. They couldn't care less. But I would charge it for them in the rate because I knew I would pad the rate a little bit and then I'd have to pay it out. But I had another customer on the other hand, very tight ship, 30 minutes. You were in and you were out. And it's possible to load, in some industries, it's possible to load very quickly, but you got to be ready. A lot of these guys these warehouses aren't ready.
It's the efficiency part, right?
Yeah.
And that building the efficiencies within your supply chain, because when we talk about transportation, right, you think just trucking, rail, just the mode of transportation. Well, you start thinking broader in supply chains, it's materials, it's warehousing, things like that.
Production.
Like driving this efficiency is ultimately what's going to, one, helps shippers become shippers of choice. And you hear that's what they want to be. Mm-hmm. They want to be a shipper that these carriers and brokers want to work with. But you don't do it by having your driver sit 140 minutes at a dock getting loaded, right? Yeah. You get them in and out because ultimately, the driver's making money by driving, not sitting at the dock.
Yeah, and shippers ultimately think like, oh, well, me having longer wait times isn't going to affect the rates that I get because I'll just pay in detention. No, subconsciously, as a broker or carrier, when you were quoting a shipper, one of the first things you ask yourself is, hey, how long does it take for him to load me? And if you know subconsciously that, man, that shipper takes forever to load us, like you're going to bump up that rate. And shippers need to realize that if you don't drive efficiencies like you were saying in your warehouse, that it will affect your transportation budget and your spend over a year's time. Mm-hmm.
And then it'll affect your network because when the market tightens up, carriers will just say, no, thanks. I don't need this now. Like I can go somewhere else. Yeah. So if you want to build a resilient and efficient supply chain with talking about warehousing, make sure those efficiencies of getting trucks loaded and unloaded it improves, really.
And you have to make sure the warehouse crew is also is able to talk and communicate with the production team or the assembly line team or the packaging team, whatever team is ultimately going to give them the goods to get onto those trucks. So, they have to be able to communicate with each other. We're getting close to the end of the time, but we have another announcement here. I believe we have until April 15th, so tax day, which is technically April 18th this year, but traditionally tax day, we've got a free giveaway. So if the Future Supply Chain is our event that is coming up in June. It's June 20th, June 21st and 22nd. But if you buy tickets before April 15th, you are going to be entered to win 2 infield club seats for the Cleveland game that's there the day before the event starts. So you got some nice MLB tickets to play around with. Should be a good time.
Yeah, and those that have already purchased tickets, you're automatically entered for this too. So
how about that?
Get on, if you want to be entered, something to do in Cleveland the night before the event starts. Yeah. There 8, 9 a.m. Get in there, buy those tickets now because and there's a sale going on. So take advantage of the spring fever sale.
That's right.
Absolutely. I think they're like $900 tickets. It's good value. So we'll see.
Great time. Plus, you get to hang out with us. So, anyways, have a fantastic rest of your day. We will see you next week live on #WithSonar, of course, and please engage with us online. We'll be shooting a lot of updates here in the coming days as to what's happening in the freight markets. Take care.